So I kind of got an idea to do this one based on a comment I got on one of the other videos. The comments, by the way, they're great as far as giving me ideas and suggestions and things to talk about. But it was someone was making a lighthearted comment about how you'll hear these people in these meetings and they'll talk about how their entire life is completely falling apart, how they owe all this money to creditors, how their wife hates them, how their children and them are on the outs, and how they're unemployed again for the 100th time, but at least they didn't drink in all of this. And believe it or not, it's kind of cringeworthy for me to admit this, but I have used that actual line before in meetings. I've said, well, I got all of these problems that are going on, and but I haven't found it necessary to take a drink. You know, that's generally the line you have to use. You can't just say, I didn't drink through the whole thing. You got to say, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink. Believe it or not, I do remember a story about somebody that supposedly picked up one of those double-digit medallions in the program and said that in all these years they hadn't found it necessary to take a drink, and apparently someone had mentioned to them that they had been drunk the night before, and they said, but it wasn't necessary, which I wouldn't be a bit surprised knowing how they love to play semantics and all that other kind of garbage. But it occurred to me that there's that one topic they just wear out in meetings all the time, where and it's always read in these really dramatic tones about, shall I be consigned to a life that is stupid, boring, and glum? And then they talk about there's a sufficient substitute. It's the fellowship of Quackaholics Anonymous. You'll be released from care and boredom and worry, and you'll have a life beyond your wildest imagination and dreams and all of that other shit. And I used to think about the fact that nobody in any of the meetings I seem to attend was living a life beyond their wildest dreams. And as a matter of fact, just based on feedback from so many other people I know that have left AA, they would all tell you about the same things. Not only are they a glum lot, in spite of the fact there was a group I went to one time, and they called themselves Waggle, of all things. W-A-A-G-L. We are not a glum lot. And of course, the meeting was just like all the other meetings you go to. You have the gurus that run the thing, that bully the spotsees around. You have the people that seem to live in the AA meetings, and you had the people like myself who were constantly getting drunk and picking up white chips and putting together little spurts of so-called sobriety that just kept going to meetings like there was some kind of answer to all of this. And then you had the court-ordered people. That's pretty much, in my experience in all the meetings I ever went to, that's pretty much the population of any particular AA meeting, unless you're going to one of those tiny little home group type places that I went to. There was one I remember I used to go to that, like, the most they ever had there was like 8 or 9 people, and the majority of them were all old timers, and it was it was a fucking snooze fest. It was a difficulty to stay awake in it. But I remember one particular time that I had been laid off. If you've been following this for any period of time, you know I did a long stint working in the printing industry. And when the printing industry kind of, well, the digital platforms and everything, it was something that we couldn't compete with in regards to the type of work I did. I mainly dealt with catalogs and junk mail. When's the last time you saw somebody sit down and open up a Sears catalog and mark an item they want and mail it in? You know, it's obsolete with things like Amazon and stuff like that. But during the layoff at one particular point, I remember it had been so many years since I'd had to wake up in the morning and actually had to go out and hunt for work. The entire environment for job searches had completely changed, and this has been several years ago, I might add. This was way before drug court, way before my bad background and, you know, the other things I've talked about on here before. But one thing that was major in the landscape of employment applications that had changed is that I had not seen. I had not seen the evolving technology with the time because I had had the steady job for, over a decade, was the fact that you no longer went inside places and got to talk to somebody or handed somebody a resume or filled out a paper application. 90% of the stuff was done online. You could go to a company and they might have a kiosk you could sit down at, but it was all completely different. It was completely new to me. The idea of picking up a newspaper and looking at the want ads, that was all gone too. You had the stuff like Indeed.com and stuff, and I was kind of going through a little phase at that time period where I was like, well, Jesus, where have I been? Have I been in a cave or something? I didn't even know any of this stuff existed. I didn't know this is how it worked. But it was on a Monday morning, I remember one time, and it was one of those mornings where I had managed to get a job interview, and it was a terrible job interview. I don't know if anybody's ever had one of those where you walk in, you got no chemistry with the person you're talking to. They're not laughing at any of your jokes. The answers you give, they're just kind of falling flat. You can tell you're not striking any notes there. And then at the end of it, they kind of give you this, well, thank you for coming in. We'll certainly call you in a couple of days. We're still interviewing you. You just kind of want to, look, cut the bullshit, okay? I know this was a fuck-up and a failure. And let's just save ourselves both some time. And let me just say to hell with this. But I was having a morning like that, and out of all the stupid things that I could have thought of, the sponsor I had at the time was saying, well, when you're not trying to get a job, you really should be staying in meetings. I mean, you've only got like a couple of months of sobriety. You really need to be in the AA meetings. I mean, that's where the solution is. Maybe you're unemployed and is God's gift to you to become more, more focused on your recovery and your sobriety. Maybe God was getting your attention. Now, I'm pretty sure that I didn't have a job because the printing industry had gone to hell in the type of field I was working in. I'm pretty sure it didn't have nothing to do with AA God wanting me to sit in meetings, but I was actually gullible enough to listen to that back then. But he was doing the whole thing, how many meetings a day are you hitting? I said, well, the usual one at night, every night. Obviously, you're in denial about the reality of your situation. It's only going to be a matter of time before you go out on another drunken binge. And I'm pretty sure you know the script by now if you've been in AA for any significant period of time. But it was a Monday morning. I wasn't in the best place. The interview had just gone to hell. At the time, I was going to this particular AA clubhouse, is what they call them, where they have like 6 meetings a day, and it seems like in between the AA meetings, there's always a bunch of people just kind of standing around looking lost in between the meetings. It's like they don't have nothing to do but go to these meetings. But at the time, I pulled up in the parking lot, and it was a noon meeting. It was at 12, and I had never been to a 12 o'clock in the afternoon meeting before. I had never done anything but my 8 o'clock at night, so that was just standard, I guess, for me. I don't know. But as I was pulling up, I remember thinking to myself, I said, well, I'm not going to know anybody at this meeting. I'm not going to know any of the people. Maybe it won't be such a bad thing after all. Maybe I can hear something different outside of the same people I've been hearing over and over again. Well, I walked inside, and it was the same fucking people that I would see at 8 o'clock at night every night. And I was like, doesn't anybody have a job? Doesn't anybody work? I mean, how do you find time to always be here? It's literally almost the same exact crowd. There was a couple of faces I didn't recognize. But as far as the old-timer gurus, as far as the people that their career in life was going to AA meetings, it was the same crowd of people. And there was a part of me at this time that I hadn't really got to the place in my mind where I knew AA was bullshit. To show you a difference in the way I thought then and now. And there was a part of me, though, that was thinking to myself, this is a mistake. I mean, there's other things I could be doing in the afternoon, on a Monday afternoon, than sitting here in this meeting with these same people that I hear talk night after night. And but anyway, I went ahead and sat down, and the topic was read, and it was that thing about, am I consigned to a life where I'm stupid and boring and glum? And I remember looking around the room at all these people, the ones who make a career move out of going to AA, the people that just sort of, I don't know exactly what they actually do in AA. They just sort of hang out there all the time. And then I was looking at these dour, angry, borderline neurotic old timers, and I was looking, around at this, and I thought, well, this is not exactly my definition of a life beyond my wildest dreams. This is not exactly my idea of release from care and boredom and worry and all the, I'm sitting here worried about my unemployment checks running out, me not having a sufficient job at the time because the rent is still due. I really need to be busy. I don't need to be wasting my time here at the time. And then there was this little voice in my head that actually said, well, you haven't got that much time in the program as far as sobriety is concerned. You really can't quit drinking. So, the problem is definitely you. So you really need to give it your all here. And I was literally thinking just like this at the time. Well, the very first guy talked, and it was almost like inside I wanted to groan because he was going to say the same things that he always said at every meeting. It didn't matter what the topic was. It didn't matter what was read. He was going to talk about how he didn't like his wife, how he hated his children, and he was going to work around to saying his daughter was a slut, which, what kind of thing is that for a guy to say about his daughter? I hate my daughter. She's nothing but a slut. I mean, what does that say about you? To say something like that. But then he would always work it around to this story he would tell about how when he was 14 years old, his father was having an affair with another woman, and they used to leave him at home for like 2 days at a time on the weekends, all by himself with like $40 or $50. His dad would hand him the money and say, have fun, and they would disappear. And this supposedly had something to do with some kind of fucking trauma thing. I don't know what it was. I was thinking to myself at the time, if my parents had left me like $40, $50, let's see, when I was 14 years old, that would have been like 1991, I would have probably been overjoyed. I just said, well, I'm going to go to Roy Rogers and get all the good cheeseburgers, and I'm going to go get ice cream, and I'm going to go to the Blockbusters, and I'm going to go to the mall, and I'm going to rent a whole bunch of movies I'm not allowed to watch. I'm going to stay up till 1 in the morning. I mean, I would have been overjoyed with a prospect like that. But he would always work it around to how, this whole entire thing shaped his childhood and how he never knew how to have a normal relationship. And I thought, yeah, you're saying you don't know how to have a normal relationship, but all you do is sit here and complain about how much you hate your children and how much you hate your wife. I mean, maybe the answer to all of this is not the fact that you got left home alone at 14 years old. Maybe it has something to do with now. I mean, the guy was like 50 fucking years old still talking about this, but I was sitting there and I was just twiddling my thumbs, and I kept glancing out the window, and I kept looking around at all these miserable, bored faces. And I mean, you got the gurus that sit there and they look all solemn no matter what's being said. They all look like they're so deep in thought and serious while the whole thing is. And then you got the people sitting there like that. And you got the people that are on their umpteenth hundred cup of coffee, and while he's blabbering away on this, and then the next guy talked, and I knew what he was going to say. He was going to tell a story about how he was on his 5th DUI when he was put in jail, and he was in the jail cell with this violently dangerous criminal, and at that moment he got down on his knees and he prayed, and he knew that in that moment that God wanted him to go to AA. And I'm thinking, something, I don't even know why I'm here. I mean, everybody who's talking, I could tell you what they're going to say verbatim before sitting down. I mean, I could take a tape recording of this meeting and play it in the car, and it would be no different than what I'm sitting there listening to. And then the next guy talked, and then the next guy talked, and then the comedian talked, and everybody was just crying, laughing over his weird jokes and all that. Now I just kept sitting there thinking, I'm wasting my entire afternoon here. I could be out trying to either try to find work or trying to get a side hustle going, or I could be doing something other than sitting here listening to this. And the meeting broke up, and of course everybody stood around outside, and they were lighting up. I was lighting up a cigarette too. I needed one after that. I felt like I was getting a headache. And everybody was talking about, oh, that was such a a deep meeting. That was such an insightful meeting. I heard what I needed to hear. You know, when someone shares something and you need to hear it, that's God telling you you need to be at the meeting. And you know, I was like, well, there is something terribly wrong with me because this isn't jiving. This isn't doing anything for me. In fact, if anything, I feel like going to a liquor store and getting me a half pint after all of this. But at the time, I was just eat up with this idea that there was something terribly wrong with me, that I wasn't getting the program of Quackaholics Anonymous. I kept thinking to myself, you know, I might not ever be able to get sober because maybe I'm just, like they're saying in there, maybe I'm constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself. Maybe there is something on my fourth step that I'm not writing down, that I'm in denial about. I was sitting there eat up with guilt over the fact that I couldn't get anything out of this meeting. I was sitting there eat up with this uncertainty and fear that the very idea that I was thinking about a drink after this meeting means I might be one of those unfortunate ones that they're always reading about and how it works. It means I'm probably not going to make it because I was fairly certain that long-term sobriety and me at that point, it just wasn't going to happen. I said, you know, if I'm not drunk this weekend, I'll be drunk for sure by next weekend if it's like this. And it was weird to me, the way that they would, you know, the way they would read the thing about there were those unfortunates who were not at fault. I remember this fear, this being full of this fear that I'm one of those unfortunate ones they're talking about. I'm one of those guys that's never going to be able to get it. I'm going to die drunk. I'm going to end up dead because I can't get what's going on here. There's something here that I'm missing. There's something here that I'm not actually tuning into. I literally felt like this. I felt like there was all this guilt because I wasn't feeling this release from care and boredom and worry and all that. In fact, if anything, it was making me more anxiety-ridden and it was making me more neurotic. And it's really strange to me how alien that type of thinking is today. You know, well, for one thing, I wouldn't sit in a meeting and listen to that shit today. I mean, the thought of that would be totally intolerable. But by getting out from under the cult religion and being out from under all of that after a period of time, it's kind of interesting to me that I would have ever been afraid of what these people were telling me about me being completely incapable of being honest and completely incapable of doing whatever the fuck it is they do in their 4 steps or whatever, you know. And the entire religious guilt thing that I had talked about in the last video, it just occurred to me that I never saw anything in AA that was a release from care and boredom and worry. I never saw anything in AA that was life beyond my wildest dreams. I just saw 90% of the time a bunch of people complaining about how miserable their lives were, but at least they hadn't had a drink today. You know, like the guy that was always complaining about how much he hated his wife and how much he hated his son and how much he hated his daughter. I remember one time it was at a night meeting. I was standing outside smoking, and and this girl came up, and she had kind of like streaks in her hair, like blue and like pink and some other kind of color. It was kind of cute, to be honest. She was very young. She had some tattoos. She had on a short skirt. She had some interesting jewelry in her ear. But anyway, without going into a lot of detail, she walked by me. She said hello, and I said hello, and she proceeded on into the building. And here's this guy, the one who hates his daughter, and the one who hates his wife, and the one who hates his son. And he's like, you know, if my daughter ever dressed like that, I'd cut her fucking throat right now. That's what I'd do right here. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, it's a little bit of an extreme reaction over the way someone dresses to want to murder them, don't you think? And he's like, well, you know, I ain't making any apologies for feeling like that. That's I mean, I wouldn't have no problem. I mean, she deserves whatever happens to her. You know, if she's raped and murdered, it would just be her fault. And I'm thinking, you're the guy who's always talking about how this program is a miracle. This program is a thing that saved your life and gave you the life beyond your wildest dreams. Yet you complain about your wife, you complain about your daughter, you complain about your son. You sound like you got all kind of repressed rage going on inside of you. You sound a little bit neurotic and a little bit crazy. You certainly don't sound like somebody I want to take fucking life advice from. But, you know, he had all these years in the program. So if I had said anything bad about him, they would have said, well, he's been sober for however fucking many years, and you have not, so he knows more than you do. No, I don't think that it's even healthy or remotely normal to look at life like this guy, at least he hasn't drank in this many years, so therefore he's mentally healthier than I am. I think this guy's a fucking lunatic. And I'm not a fucking lunatic, okay? I've got my own, hang-ups and problems, but I'm not some kind of nutcase that's complaining about the way that my wife and children are or the way that some girl looks outside of a meeting and letting it affect me to the point that I'm freaking out like that. But these are the people I'm supposed to want to aspire to be like. I think I take a hard pass on that. But at least I haven't drank today. That's supposed to be my crowning glory. That's supposed to be my big achievement for associating with these kinds of abhorrent people in general. At least I haven't had a drink today. It's really a funny thing that recently I had a situation on my hands at work, and at the same time I had this situation on my hands at work, I had something else going on with in my private life. Nothing major, nothing bad. I mean, it involved, my vehicle. It involved a whole bunch of expenses that I couldn't afford. It involved all this different stuff. And I never thought about saying, well, at least I had to take a drink while all this stuff was going on. I mean, I woke up in the morning and I said, okay, this evening, because I work a night shift, this evening when I go in, I got to talk to my boss about this, and I got to call my mechanic about that, and I need to write this for these people over here. I didn't think about, well, at least I haven't had a drink. In fact, I wasn't really that upset by all the turmoil and the chaos that was going on around me, other than to say, well, what are you going to do? I mean, what are you going to do about all this stuff going on? Well, you're going to take care of it. That was literally my own self-pep talk. Well, what are you going to do? Take care of it. It never occurred to me to run to a meeting and sit and listen to a bunch of sad sack, miserable assholes whine and complain about the state of the world to tell me that their life was nothing short of miraculous because they had been going to AA meetings. I mean, literally, it's almost like just getting away from the cult itself over a period of time is just a boost in your mental health in of itself by itself. And anyway, I've talked for 22 freaking minutes on this one. I wasn't exactly sure where this one was going when I got started, but until next time.